My name is Rachel Monroe, and I want to share with you the most powerful experience of my life. One that changed everything I thought I knew about death, eternity, and the love of God. This happened in 1998, during what I believed would be a routine surgery. At the time, I was a mother of 3 living in Denver, Colorado, working as a preschool teacher. For years, I had struggled with intense pain caused by severe endometriosis. The condition was relentless. Some days I could barely get out of bed, and no amount of medication seemed to help. Eventually, surgery became my only option. I was scared, but also hopeful. That morning, I remember sitting quietly in my hospital room, praying for God's protection and asking Him to guide the doctors through the procedure. I had no idea that my prayer would lead to an encounter that would change my life forever. When they placed the mask over my face, I expected to slip into unconsciousness without much thought. At first, everything was normal. I felt myself slowly drifting away, the sounds around me fading. But instead of sinking into complete darkness, something strange happened. I suddenly became aware of a burning pain, an unbearable fire that seemed to spread through my entire abdomen. It wasn't like anything I'd felt before. It was sharp, searing, and all-consuming. I remember trying to scream, to move, to make someone aware that something was wrong, but I couldn't. My body wouldn't respond, and I felt completely trapped. The voices of the doctors and nurses faded in and out like distant echoes. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I knew something wasn't right. Just when I thought the pain would overwhelm me, everything shifted. The pain disappeared, and I felt myself rising, lifting up and away from my body. I remember looking down and seeing myself on the operating table. My face was pale, and the doctors looked tense as they worked to stabilize me. The sight was unsettling, like watching a movie I couldn't control, but instead of fear, I felt calm. It was as if all my worries, anxiety, and pain had vanished. I realized with absolute clarity that I had died. But somehow, that thought didn't scare me. Instead, I felt free, like I had been released from a weight I didn't even realize I had been carrying. I drifted upward, and the farther I moved from my body, the closer I felt to something incredible. A warm, glowing light that seemed to pull me in. It wasn't like any light I'd ever seen. It wasn't just bright, it was alive. The light seemed to wrap around me, filling me with peace and comfort unlike anything I'd ever experienced. And then, I saw Him. Standing in the heart of that light was Jesus. His presence was overwhelming, not in a way that frightened me, but in a way that made me feel completely safe and loved. He wore a robe that shimmered like it was woven from light itself, and His face radiated kindness. But as I looked into His eyes, I saw something else, a sadness that seemed to run deeper than words could explain. Yet even with that sadness, His love was undeniable. It was as if He knew every mistake I had ever made, every regret I carried. Yet He still looked at me with nothing but compassion. He didn't speak in words the way we do, but somehow His voice filled my entire being. He said, "So many people seek what I can give them, but they don't seek me." Those words hit me hard. There was no anger in His voice, just sorrow, like He was grieving for those who had turned away from Him. When He reached out His hand to me, I didn't hesitate. The moment I touched Him, everything changed. I was no longer standing in the light. I was in heaven. Heaven was unlike anything I could have imagined. The very air seemed to hum with life, and every part of it felt alive, not just with color or sound, but with love. The grass beneath my feet wasn't just green. It seemed to glow with a richness that was almost impossible to describe. Flowers bloomed in colors I had never seen before, and their petals seemed to shimmer as if they were made of light. The sky was vast and radiant, yet somehow soft and comforting. There was a warmth in the air, not like heat from the sun, but a warmth that seemed to reach straight into my soul. I felt whole, like every broken part of me had been restored. The weight of my struggles, my pain, my regrets, It was all gone. I knew in that moment that I was home. As I walked through this incredible place, I noticed something that filled me with overwhelming joy: my grandmother. She had passed away when I was a teenager, and losing her had left a hole in my heart that never quite healed. But there she was, standing before me, radiant and full of life. When she smiled at me, I felt years of grief melt away. We didn't need words. Somehow, we just knew what the other was feeling. When she embraced me, I felt her love flow through me in a way that's hard to explain. It wasn't just an emotional warmth. It felt like her love became part of me, like we were connected in a way that went far deeper than anything I had experienced on earth. As I turned, I saw someone else: my father. He had passed when I was still a child, and his death had left so many unanswered questions in my life. Yet here he was, standing strong and full of peace. He looked younger than I remembered him, yet somehow I knew it was him. When he hugged me, I felt this incredible sense of closure, like all the pain and longing I had carried for him had been lifted in an instant. Without saying a word, I knew he was telling me he loved me, that he had been watching over me, and that everything was going to be okay. In that moment, I realized something powerful. Heaven wasn't just beautiful because of what it looked like. It was beautiful because of the overwhelming love that filled every part of it. Jesus was still by my side as I walked through heaven, and he guided me deeper into this incredible place. As we moved forward, I saw others, people I didn't recognize, yet somehow I felt connected to them. It was as if they were family, even though I had no memory of meeting them before. There was no sense of distance or awkwardness, just pure love, like we all belonged to one another. Every soul seemed to radiate joy, and there was a peace that filled the air. I remember noticing that the light in heaven didn't just shine around me, it seemed to shine through me, like I was part of it. Every part of me felt whole, loved, and deeply known. Then Jesus showed me something that left me in awe: angels. They were unlike anything I had imagined. They were magnificent beings of light, filled with a presence that seemed to hum with power and joy. They moved gracefully, yet purposefully, like waves of light flowing together in perfect harmony. As I watched them, I felt overwhelmed by the love they radiated, not just toward God, but toward everyone in heaven. It was clear that their entire existence was dedicated to worshiping and serving Him, and their devotion filled the air like music that I could feel in my very soul. Jesus then led me to what I can only describe as a throne, a brilliant, majestic presence that filled the entire space with power and love. Though I couldn't see God the Father directly, I knew He was there. His presence was so overwhelming that I felt like I could barely stand in His light. Yet at the same time, I felt completely safe and cherished. I knew that He knew everything about me, every flaw, every mistake, every weakness, yet I felt no shame. Instead, I felt loved in a way that I had never experienced before. It was a love that went beyond words, a love that made me feel like I belonged, like I had always belonged. I felt small in His presence, yet somehow precious, as if I was deeply valued, no matter what I had done in my life. After standing in that incredible presence, I felt like nothing could pull me away from the peace and love that surrounded me. But then Jesus turned to me with a different expression. His eyes, still filled with kindness, now carried a deeper sadness. He told me that there was something else He needed to show me, something that would be difficult to see, but important for me to understand. I trusted Him completely, so I agreed. In an instant, everything around me changed. The warmth and light of heaven disappeared, and I found myself in a place I can only describe as hell. It was cold, dark, and filled with an overwhelming sense of emptiness. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating, and the silence wasn't peaceful, it was oppressive. I saw people there, souls who looked lost and broken. They weren't gathered together like they had been in heaven. Instead, each person seemed isolated, trapped in their own pain. Some were crying out, others just sat in silence, their faces filled with regret and sorrow. It wasn't just sadness I saw, It was hopelessness, like they knew they would never feel peace or joy again. I remember seeing one man in particular. He was alone, pacing back and forth, muttering to himself. His face was twisted in anger, and it seemed like his bitterness was consuming him. I could feel his pain, not just physical pain, but a deep, soul-crushing regret that seemed to weigh him down like chains. Jesus told me that this man had spent his life rejecting love, not just God's love, but the love of others as well. His anger and pride had kept him isolated, and now that isolation had followed him into eternity. Jesus explained that hell wasn't a place God wanted anyone to go. It was the result of souls turning away from his love. I could feel the heartbreak in Jesus' voice as he spoke, and it was clear that this pain wasn't just for the man I saw, it was for every soul that had chosen this separation. What struck me most wasn't just the suffering, it was the finality of it. In heaven, there was endless joy and connection, but here, there was nothing but emptiness. No hope, no comfort, just endless regret. Jesus held my hand the entire time, and I knew he was showing me this not to frighten me, but to help me understand the weight of our choices and the depth of his love for every soul. After what felt like an eternity in that cold, empty place, Jesus brought me back to heaven. The warmth, the light, the overwhelming peace, it all returned, washing over me like a wave. I felt relieved to be back, but something inside me had changed. The joy I had felt earlier was still there, but now it was mixed with a heavy sense of urgency. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen, those souls trapped in pain, separated from the love they were created to know. I turned to Jesus, and before I could say a word, he spoke. He told me, "Your work isn't finished." I knew exactly what he meant. He showed me my family, my husband, my children, and I realized they still needed me. I saw moments from their future. Moments where my presence, my words, or my prayers would make a difference in their lives. Jesus told me there were others too, people I hadn't even met yet, people who felt lost, broken, or too far gone. He wanted them to know that no one was beyond his love, no matter what they had done or how far they had wandered. He said that his love could reach even the darkest places, but people had to choose it. I realized then that my purpose wasn't just to return to my life, it was to share what I had seen, to help others understand just how real heaven and hell truly are. I didn't want to leave. Being in heaven felt like home, but I knew I had to go back. Jesus promised me that he would be with me, guiding me every step of the way. With his assurance in my heart, I said yes. Almost instantly, I felt myself being pulled away from heaven. It was like being yanked through space, and before I knew it, I was back in my body. I opened my eyes to see doctors and nurses surrounding me, working frantically to stabilize me. My body felt weak and heavy, but my heart was full of peace, purpose, and the undeniable truth of what I had seen. Waking up in that hospital bed felt strange. My body ached, and I could barely move, but none of that seemed to matter. My mind was racing, not with fear or confusion, but with a powerful sense of purpose. I knew what I had seen was real. Heaven was real. Hell was real. Jesus was real. And now, I knew why I had been sent back. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about the things Jesus had shown me, especially the people I had seen in hell. It broke my heart to remember their faces, the way they seemed trapped in endless regret and sorrow. But what stayed with me even more was the sadness in Jesus' eyes, that deep grief he carried for those who had turned away from him. I realized that his love wasn't just for the people who believed in him, it was for everyone. Even those who had rejected him, those who felt broken beyond repair, he still loved them with everything he had. I knew I couldn't stay silent about what I had experienced. Once I was strong enough to speak, I began sharing my story. At first, it was just with close friends and family. I told my husband what had happened, and although he didn't know what to make of it at first, he could see that I had changed. The anxiety I had struggled with for years was gone. The anger I had held on to, gone. I felt free in a way I never had before, and people could see it. As I started sharing my experience with others, I realized how many people were searching for hope, for answers, for something to believe in. I told them what Jesus had told me, that no one is too far gone for his love to reach them. If you're hearing this now, I believe it's for a reason. Maybe you feel lost, broken, or too far gone to be saved. But I need you to know that Jesus hasn't given up on you. No matter what you've done or how far you feel from him, he's still reaching out to you. Heaven is real, and it's more beautiful than I can describe. Hell is real too, and I wouldn't wish what I saw there on anyone. But the most important truth I can share is that Jesus' love is greater than anything in this world, and it's waiting for you. Don't wait to turn to him. Don't wait to say yes to his love. Your eternity depends on it. If this story touched your heart, I ask you to share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you haven't yet accepted Jesus into your life, I encourage you to take that step today. He's waiting with open arms. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you.